Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into one of the most aesthetically obsessed, beautifully awkward, and poetically intense dating scenes in all of history, 11th century Japan. Imagine a world where your romantic success depends not on your confidence, but on the quality of your calligraphy and your ability to choose the correct flower to attach to a love letter. Honestly, your modern dating app profile would be useless here. You would probably get socially exiled for using an emoji. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other history lovers and night owls like us. And while you are at it, drop a comment letting me know what city you are listening from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see where everyone is in the world as we start these journeys. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The air in Heian Japan feels different. It is thick with the smells of damp earth from meticulously raked gardens, the sweet perfume of plum blossoms, and the pervasive, almost sacred scent of incense wafting from behind painted screens. You have just arrived in the capital, the center of the universe as far as anyone who matters is concerned. This city, a perfect grid of streets and avenues modeled after the great Tang capital in China, is a masterpiece of design, but you are quickly learning that its real structure is not made of wooden tile, but of impossibly high standards and unspoken rules. You are a young aristocrat, a member of the rarefied elite, which means your life is a strange cocktail of immense privilege and suffocating boredom. Your days are not filled with work or warfare. They are dedicated to the pursuit of pure, unadulterated elegance. This concept has a name, Miyabi. It is the soul of the court, the invisible measuring stick against which your every action is judged. The way you fold a fan, the color of your robes, the grace with which you play a flute. These are the things that define your worth. Your entire existence is a performance, and the audience is everyone. Your new home is a testament to this life. It is not a fortress but a series of airy, interconnected rooms with polished wooden floors. Instead of solid walls, you have fusuma, sliding panels of paper that can be removed to open up the entire house to the garden, and shoji screens that glow with soft, diffused light. Privacy is a fluid concept here. You are always separated from the outside world, yet you are never truly alone. Servants glide silently in and out of rooms, their footsteps a soft whisper on the floorboards. Their eyes miss nothing. In the morning, you spend hours with your attendants just getting dressed. Your silk robes are layered, each color chosen to reflect the specific season, sometimes even the specific mood of a famous poem. It is a walking piece of art. You also find yourself contemplating a rather peculiar fashion choice, teeth blackening. The practice, known as oeguro, involves painting your teeth with a dark lacquer made from iron filings and vinegar. It is considered a mark of beauty and maturity, a striking contrast to the powdered white faces that are also in vogue. To a modern eye, it might seem strange, but here it is the height of sophistication. You have not decided if you will commit to it yet. Your days are long and unstructured. You might practice your calligraphy, painstakingly copying classic poems, knowing that a single misplaced stroke could be interpreted as a sign of a clumsy mind. Or you might attempt to compose a waka, a 31-syllable poem, about the way the dew clings to a spider's web in the morning light. There are no grand quests or adventures. Your battlefield is a sheet of mulberry paper. Your dragon is a poorly constructed metaphor. And then there are the women. You hear whispers of them. You catch fleeting glimpses of impossibly long, beautiful black hair peeking from behind a screen or the edge of a colorful sleeve disappearing around a corner. But you never see their faces. The women of the court live in near seclusion, shielded from the male gaze by bamboo blinds, screens of state, and layers upon layers of silk. This is where you encounter one of the great debates among historians who study this era. Historians question whether these women were simply prisoners in gilded cages, their lives entirely dictated by their male relatives, or if they were the true power brokers of the court, wielding immense influence through their literary talents, strategic alliances, and the careful management of their reputations. The truth, as is often the case, is likely somewhere in between, a complex reality that we can only glimpse through the poetry and diaries they left behind. As night falls, the world shrinks to the soft glow of an oil lamp. The city outside your compound grows quiet, save for the occasional cry of a night bird or the distant trumble of an ox cart. It is in this stillness that a deep sense of loneliness can creep in. You are surrounded by beauty, steeped in art, but disconnected from any real, direct human contact. You wonder how you meet someone in a world of screens, how you fall in love with a person you cannot even see. The answer, you are beginning to understand, lies in the rustle of paper, the scent of a flower, and the carefully chosen words that will have to travel where you cannot. So you are ready to enter the game. But the first, and most baffling, rule of this game is that you are playing it blindfolded. The objects of your affection, the noble women of the Heian court, are essentially invisible. This is not an exaggeration. It is a foundational principle of your entire social world. You will not be catching a lady's eye across a crowded room because the room is designed specifically to prevent that. Your first encounter with this reality is likely to be frustrating. You might be visiting a high-ranking courtier's residence, discussing the finer points of Chinese poetry or the miserable quality of this year's melons. While you speak with your host, you become aware of a presence on the other side of a screen. It might be a soft laugh, the faint rustle of silk, or the sound of a koto being plucked delicately. That is his daughter, or perhaps a visiting niece, and she is listening. She is judging your wit, your voice, your every word, but her face remains a complete mystery to you. The primary obstacle between you and her is the SUDR, elegant bamboo blinds that hang in every doorway and window. They are not solid. They allow slivers of light, muted sounds, and fragrant scents to pass through, creating a world of shadows and suggestions. Looking at a SUDR, you might see a vague silhouette, a flicker of color, but never a clear image. It is like trying to watch a movie through a picket fence. For more formal occasions or for women of higher rank, there is an even more formidable barrier, the kicho or screen of state. This is a portable curtain of heavy silk, usually 2 meters high, draped over a lacquered wooden stand. It can be moved unpositioned to create an impenetrable wall of fabric within a room, completely shielding the women behind it. It is, for all intents and purposes, a beautiful, portable privacy wall. The justification for all this is, on the surface, about propriety and protection. A respectable woman's reputation is her most valuable asset. To be seen directly by a man who was not her husband or a close relative was a source of deep shame, an event that could tarnish her prospects forever. So this system of screens and blinds evolved to keep men and women in their separate spheres, even when they were in the same room. But this is where a fascinating historical debate continues to smolder. Historians wonder if this was purely a system of oppression, a way for a patriarchal society to control its women by rendering them unseen and anonymous, or if women, in their seclusion, found a unique and powerful form of agency. By being invisible, they cultivated an aura of mystery. Denied a physical presence, they were forced to develop other weapons, their intellect, their artistic talent, their wit. They became masters of the written word, their personalities shining through in their poetry and calligraphy. Some historians argue that this very seclusion is what allowed for the flourishing of female writers like Murasaki, Shikibu, and Des. Aishona Gon, who produced literary masterpieces from behind the screen. You quickly learn that you have to adjust your senses. Is no longer your primary tool for judging attraction. You learn to listen. You wonder if her voice is high and musical, if her laugh sounds genuine. You learn to smell. Every noble lady had her own signature blend of incense, a unique perfume she would use to scent her robes, her letters, and the varied air around her. Catching a whiff of a particular scent could be more intoxicating than a direct gaze. And then there is the one tantalizing, sanctioned glimpse you might get. This is the ultimate code knowledge of Heian courtship. While a lady would be hidden behind her kicho, it was fashionable for her to artfully arrange the cuffs of her multi-layered robes, the famous Juni Haito, or 12-layered robe, so that they spilled out from underneath the screen onto the floor. This was no accident. It was a calculated display. The combination of colors, the quality of the silk, The way the layers fell, it was a statement. You, as the male visitor, were expected to notice and appreciate this sliver of her aesthetic. You could fall in love with someone based entirely on the color palette of their sleeves. It is a level of aesthetic pressure that is hard to comprehend. Imagine being judged on the way your socks peek out from under a door. Of course, human nature being what it is, rules are always tested. There was a practice romanticized in literature but incredibly risky in reality, called kaimami. This literally means peeking through a gap in the fence. A lovesick man might sneak into the gardens surrounding a lady's quarters at night, hoping to catch a glimpse of her through a tear in a screen or a gap in a shutter as she read or played music. This was the stuff of high romance and high scandal. If you were caught, it would be a disaster for everyone involved. But the very existence of the practice shows how powerful the desire to see the unseen truly was. So you sit there, sipping your tea, staring at an inanimate bamboo screen. The woman on the other side is a phantom, a collection of hints and whispers. You cannot flirt with your eyes. You cannot win her over with a charming smile. Those tools are useless to you. You are separated by a wall of silk and etiquette, and you realize there is only one way to cross that divide, one way to make your presence known and show her the quality of your mind and soul. You have to write. Before you even think about picking up a brush to write that first, crucial poem, you have to understand the currency of your world. It is not gold or land or military prowess. The currency of Heian Japan is taste. An impeccable, almost superhuman sense of aesthetic judgment is the only thing that truly matters. This is all wrapped up in that word you keep hearing everywhere, miyabi, or courtly elegance. To lack miyabi is to be a social ghost, a clumsy OAF who might as well be invisible. To possess it is to be admired, respected, and, most importantly, desired. This is not just about having good taste in the way we think of it today. It is not about liking the right indie bands or appreciating minimalist furniture. Miyabi is a totalizing philosophy. It dictates that every single facet of your life must be a work of art. Think about your clothes. You do not just grab a robe in the morning. Your attendants present you with layered silks, and the color combinations, the Kasani no Irome, are rigidly prescribed by the season and even the month. For spring, you might wear layers of plum blossom pink over willow green. To wear autumnal colors like crimson and gold in the middle of April would be more than a fashion mistake. It would be a sign that you are out of tune with the natural world. A person of profound insensitivity, your very being would be considered jarring and unpleasant. This obsession with taste extends to every activity. You are expected to be an accomplished musician. You should be able to play the flute well enough to evoke the loneliness of a deer crying in the mountains, and pluck the biwa, the Japanese lute, to accompany a recitation of a tragic poem. Your musical skill is not for a concert hall. It is for a private moment, perhaps played from behind your own screen, to be overheard by a passing lady and her attendants. Then there are the games. The aristocracy's idea of a fun afternoon get-together was not a sport, but an aesthetic battle. You might be invited to a takamura awazi, an incense blending contest. Here nobles would bring their own secret, painstakingly crafted incense recipes. Each blend would be burned, and a judge would declare a winner based on the subtlety, elegance, and evocative power of the fragrance. Or perhaps you would attend an iaiwazi, a picture judging contest, where teams would present painted scrolls to be critiqued on their artistry and emotional depth. These were not friendly hobbies. Reputations were won and lost at these events. A victory could elevate your social standing for months. A loss could be a source of quiet shame. And here is a wonderfully weird little detail about this world of taste. It could get ridiculously specific. Scholars of the period have cataloged the names for the hundreds of official color combinations for robes. They have names like rotten wood, which, despite its unappealing title, was a subtle and beautiful combination of greens and browns. It was also important to know which paper to use for a letter. A thick, starchy white paper might be fine for official business, but for a personal note, you need something more delicate. A pale blue paper for a sad poem, or a light green one for a message of springtime hope. Using the wrong paper would be like sending a text message in all caps with a dozen grammatical errors. It is just crude. This brings us to a debate that still circulates among academics. Was this culture of Miyabi a genuine, spiritual elevation of beauty, a society that truly believed art was the highest calling of humanity, or was it, at its core, a sophisticated form of social gatekeeping? Consider this: the aristocratic class in Heian made up less than 1/10% of Japan's total population. They were a tiny bubble of elites living in unimaginable luxury, supported by a vast rural population they never saw. By creating a culture with such an impossibly high barrier to entry, a culture that required years of education in poetry, music, calligraphy, and countless other refined pursuits, they effectively ensured their own exclusivity. A provincial lord might be wealthier than you, but if he showed up to court in the wrong color robes and wrote a clumsy poem, he would be treated as nothing more than an uncultured buffoon. Miyabi, some historians argue, was the ultimate class weapon, a beautiful wall designed to keep the unworthy out. You feel the weight of this every day. The way you walk across the polished floor, the way you pause to admire a single cherry blossom in a vase, the way you mix the ink for your calligraphy, it is all being observed. It is all part of your resume. You are being graded constantly on your ability to perceive and create beauty. So when the moment comes, when you hear the name of a lady being praised for her poetry, when a friend of a friend mentions that a certain minister's daughter is known for her skill at the koto, you understand the stakes. You cannot just walk up and say hello. You cannot send her a note that says, "Hey, I hear you are cool. We should hang out." Your first move must be a perfect, calculated expression of Miyabi. It has to be a masterpiece in miniature, because in this world, your taste is not just a part of who you are. It is who you are. It does not happen with a dramatic flourish. There is no formal introduction, no grand presentation. Her existence filters into your consciousness the way the morning mist seeps into the gardens of the capital, quietly, and then all at once, you hear her name for the first time, not from her own lips, but as a piece of high-value currency in the court's endless economy of gossip. Perhaps you are lounging with a few friends, other young noblemen whose primary occupation is also the elegant management of their own boredom. You are complaining about the heat, or perhaps composing a linked verse about the cicadas. One of them, a cousin who is known for being well-connected, idly fans himself and mentions the reputation of the minister of the right's second daughter, saying her last poem on the autumn moon was so perfect. The emperor himself requested a copy, or maybe you overhear it. You are passing by a group of ladies in waiting, who are chatting just loudly enough for their words to carry. They are shielded by a screen, of course, but their voices are clear. They speak of their mistress, a lady you have never heard of, praising her skill on the koto. One says her music can make you feel the sorrow of 1,000 winters. Another adds that her calligraphy is so fluid and graceful, it looks like a flock of birds taking flight. This is how it begins, not with a face, but with a reputation. The woman is a collection of curated details, a living legend assembled from poetic triumphs, artistic sensitivities, and whispered praise. You learn that she is a master of blending incense, that her signature scent is a subtle mix of sandalwood and clove that is meant to evoke the feeling of a cool evening. You learn that her appreciation for the delicate beauty of a single, dew-covered morning glory is the talk of her household. What you do not learn is anything concrete. You have no idea what she looks like. You wonder if she is tall or short, if she has a cheerful smile or a melancholy gaze. These things are not considered important. In fact, they are irrelevant. You are not meant to be attracted to her physical form. You are meant to fall in love with her soul as expressed through her art. It is an incredibly romantic and profoundly strange concept. You are essentially developing a crush on a resume. This is where the role of the people around her becomes absolutely critical. Her ladies-in-waiting are not just servants, they are her public relations team, her gatekeepers, and her spies. This is a fascinating bit of courtly machinery that often gets overlooked. These women, who were often from slightly lower-ranking noble families themselves, had a vested interest in their mistress's success. A good match for their lady meant security and prestige for them all. So, they would engage in a subtle, sophisticated marketing campaign. They would strategically drop compliments about her talents where they knew an eligible young man like you might hear them. they would accidentally leave one of her poems where it might be found. As SCI Shona Gyo notes in her famous Pillow book, the chattered alliances within the women's quarters were a powerful political and social force. This leads to a compelling debate among scholars of the Heian period. To what extent was this reputation building an act of female empowerment? On one hand, it gave these cloistered women a way to project their identity and attract a desirable partner. A woman with a stellar reputation for her poetry and taste had options. She could, through her responses to potential suitors, exercise a degree of choice in a society that gave her very little formal power. Her was her voice, her armor, and her advertisement. But on the other side of the argument, many historians ask how much of this reputation was truly her own. Was she expressing her authentic self, or was she performing a role carefully crafted by her family? A father with a talented daughter saw her as a valuable asset, a key to forging a powerful alliance with another family. The pressure on her to live up to her own polished legend must have been immense. Every poem had to be perfect, every note of music flawless. A single misstep, a single clumsy verse could damage the family as brand. So, scholars wonder if the reputation was a tool of liberation, or just a more beautiful cage. The answer is likely lost somewhere in the space between the two. For now, you do not care about these academic questions. All you know is that a seed has been planted in your mind. This woman, this phantom assembled from person sent in rumor, begins to take up residence in your thoughts. You find yourself listening more intently for her name in conversations. You try to imagine the personality behind the poetry. You wonder if the woman who wrote about the lonely autumn moon is as melancholic as her words suggest, or if she possesses a hidden wit. You are intrigued. More than intrigued, you are captivated by the mystery. The fact that you cannot see her only makes the image in your mind more vivid, more perfect. You have found a target for your refined sensibilities, a worthy audience for your own poetic ambitions. The game is no longer an abstract exercise in courtly life. It has a purpose now. All the years you have spent practicing your calligraphy, memorizing classic poems, and learning the subtle language of flowers have been leading to this. You must make contact. You must send the first letter. The decision is made. The target is chosen. Now comes the moment of truth. The single most terrifying and consequential act in the entire courtship ritual, composing the first poem. This is not just a friendly hello. It is your opening move, your statement of intent, and a full-scale exhibition of your taste, intelligence, and sensitivity, all condensed into 31 perfect syllables. No pressure. This poetic form you must use is the waka, sometimes called tanke. It has a strict 5-7-5-7-7 syllable structure. It is short, elegant, and incredibly difficult to master. You cannot just say what you mean directly. That would be horrendously crude. The poetic equivalent of shouting in a library. I think you are pretty is out of the question. Instead, you have to communicate through layers of metaphor, allusion, and seasonal imagery. Your entire being must be poured into this tiny vessel. So, you begin. You sit at your low writing desk, the tools of your craft laid out before you. The inkstone, the inkstick, a small water dropper, and a fine-haired brush. You do not just start writing. The first step is to grind the ink. This is a meditative process. You pour a few drops of water onto the stone and begin to rub the solid ink stick in slow, deliberate circles. The friction creates a liquid ink, and the air fills with its faint earthy smell. The quality of the ink, its darkness, its consistency, is the first test. A rushed, watery ink would be a sign of an impatient and shallow mind. Now what to write? The subject of your first poem must be impeccably chosen. It absolutely cannot be about her. That would be far too direct, too presumptuous. You cannot write. Your reputation precedes you. And I am smitten. Instead, you must write about something neutral, something in the natural world. A commentary on the weather is always a safe bet. It is the Heian equivalent of small talk. Let us say it is early summer. You might look out at your garden and see the rain falling on the leaves of a lotus plant. An idea begins to form. The rainwater on the lotus leaf is like a jewel, beautiful but fleeting, ungraspable. It reminds you of something, perhaps a feeling of longing, or maybe a reputation that is pure and untouched. You are getting warmer. Your poem might end up being something like this, translated of course. On the lotus leaf, the dead drip, a perfect sphere, glistens for a moment, but my hand cannot touch it before it rolls away from me. It is not a declaration of love. It is a quiet philosophical observation. But the subtext is everything. You are the hand reaching out. She is the dead drip, beautiful, pure, and currently out of your reach. You have paid her a compliment by comparing her to this pristine image from nature. You have expressed your longing without using the word I or you. And you have demonstrated that you are a man of refined sensibility, someone who notices the small, beautiful tragedies of the natural world. It is subtle, it is elegant, it is myope. Now here is a wonderfully weird piece of trivia about this poetic exchange. The system was so formalized that there were accepted starter poems, almost like templates. One of the most classic opening gambits was a poem about the Katsura tree, which was famous in myth and literature. A man might send a poem alluding to his desire to pluck a branch from the legendary Katsura tree on the moon. It was a well-known metaphor for reaching for a high-ranking, unattainable woman. The lady, in her response, could then play along, extending the metaphor by saying the branch was too high, or perhaps hinting that the climb might be worth it. It is like using a well-known pickup line, but one that has been sanctioned by centuries of literary tradition. This brings us to one of the ongoing scholarly debates: how much originality was actually valued in these exchanges. We tend to think of poetry as a deeply personal expression of individual genius. But in the Heian court, poetry was also a communal language built on a shared library of classic texts, famous poems, and established metaphors. A successful poem often was not one that was shockingly new, but one that demonstrated a masterful and clever use of an old idea. Some historians argue that this focus on illusion and tradition could be artistically stifling, a system that rewarded clever imitation over true invention. Others contend that this is a misunderstanding of how art worked in this culture. For them, creativity was found in the nuance, in how you could take a famous line from a Chinese poem and give it a fresh, Japanese twist, or how you could use a well-worn seasonal image in a way that felt both familiar and new. The argument really comes down to a fundamental question of what the true nature of creativity is. You do not have time to ponder that. You have settled on your lotus leaf poem. You have practiced it a few times on a spare sheet of paper. Now you have to commit it to the final version. You take a deep breath, center yourself, and let the brush flow across the paper. Every stroke, every character must be perfect, because she and her hypercritical ladies-in-waiting will not just be reading your words. They will be dissecting your handwriting. The poem is written. The 5 lines of delicate characters sit on the page, a perfect little cage for your carefully veiled emotions. But you are nowhere near finished. In many ways, the hard part is just beginning. No, you must package it, because in the Heian court, the wrapping is just as important as the gift. The paper, the ink, the folding style, and the obligatory attached flower are all part of the message. To send a brilliant poem on shabby paper would be like serving a gourmet meal on a paper plate. It would ruin everything. First, the paper itself. You cannot just use any old sheet. The color and texture of the paper must complement the mood of the poem and the season. Your poem about the fleeting dead drip on a lotus leaf has a slightly melancholic, philosophical tone. A bright, celebratory red paper would be a disaster. A stark white might be too plain, too official. You need something subtle. You choose a very pale gray-blue paper, something the color of a rainy sky. It is thin with a satisfying smooth texture that took your brush well. This choice says, I am a man who understands nuance. I feel the quiet sadness of the world, just like you. Next, you must consider how to present the paper. You could write on a single sheet, but for a truly elegant presentation, you might use layered paper. Perhaps you take your pale blue sheet and lightly paste it onto a slightly larger sheet of deep indigo, so it creates a dark, contemplative border. The art of layering these colors, known as okudashi, was another arena for you to display your impeccable taste. Now comes the fold. You do not just stuff it into an envelope. An envelope has not been invented yet. You must fold the letter itself into a specific shape. The most common and respectable fold for a love letter was a long, narrow knot called the musubibumi. The technique is precise, almost like origami. It involves a series of intricate folds that create an elegant, knotted shape. A clumsily tied knot would suggest clumsy fingers, and by extension, a clumsy soul. It had to be tight enough to be secure but loose enough that the lady could open it without tearing the precious paper. Some historical sources suggest there were different styles of knots for different occasions, a secret language of paper folding that is now mostly lost to us. Once the letter is folded and knotted, you face the final, critical choice, the botanical attachment. Every formal letter of this type must have a fresh flower or a branch from a tree tucked into its knot. This is not just decoration. The branch is a living, breathing extension of the poem's sentiment. It is a real-time, real-world symbol that connects your abstract words to the tangible beauty of nature. For your lotus leaf poem, the choice seems obvious: a lotus leaf will blossom. But it is early summer, and the lotus flowers might not be in full bloom yet. This is where true mastery comes in. A lesser man might just grab any old flower. But you, a connoisseur of Miyobi, know better. You go to the garden yourself. The lotus leaf is a good idea, but you want to add another layer of meaning. You see a spray of maiden hyagrass, Neichiko. In the poetic language of flowers, Neichiko is often associated with feminine beauty and longing. Perfect. You snip a single, perfect stalk of grass, one with a few delicate pink flowers still clinging to it. You make sure a few drops of morning dew are still visible on the petals. This detail is crucial. The dew connects directly back to your poem about the dead drop. You are creating a unified artistic statement. The poem says, "I long for something beautiful and unattainable." The flower says, "And that beautiful thing is you." The dew on the flower says, "And I am writing this right now in this very moment with you in my thoughts." This complex floral symbolism is a historian's dream and a nightmare. While some flower meanings were relatively standardized, the plum blossom for courage in winter, the cherry blossom for the fleeting nature of life, many were contextual and open to interpretation. This has led to a long-standing debate. Historians wonder if there was a universally understood, rigid language of flowers in Heian Japan, like a botanical codebook, or if it was more fluid and personal, with meanings that shifted depending on the poem, the season, and the specific relationship between two people. The scholarly consensus generally leans toward the latter, suggesting that while there were common associations, true poetic skill came from using flowers in a fresh and personally meaningful way. You carefully tuck the stalk of Neichiko into the paper knot of your letter. You step back and examine the final product. The pale blue paper, the dark ink, the elegant knot, the fresh, dew-kissed flower. It is a symphony of taste. It is more than a letter. It is a self-portrait. You have poured all your artistry and sensitivity into this small, fragile object. Now you must hand it off to the person whose role is just as critical and just as delicate as your own, your messenger. Your messenger, a young and trusted servant boy chosen for his discretion and quick feet, takes the precious object from your hands. He bows, tucks it securely into the folds of his robe, and slips out of your residence as silently as a shadow. Now it is out of your control. Your artistic soul, condensed into a fragile package of paper and flower, is making its way across the city. All you can do is wait, and perhaps try to distract yourself by composing another poem about the unbearable agony of waiting. Meanwhile, in another part of the capital, behind a series of screens and blinds, the news of the letter's imminent arrival spreads like a ripple. Our ladies-in-waiting, who have been anticipating this moment since they first started their subtle marketing campaign, feel a thrill of excitement. They whisper amongst themselves, speculating on the sender. When your servant arrives at her gate and announces his purpose, the letter is taken by a senior attendant and brought into the inner quarters. This is the moment of judgment. The lady herself, her face hidden even from her closest attendants by a fan or a small personal screen, will be present. The letter is placed before her chief lady-in-waiting. First, they will admire the package as a whole. One might whisper that he chose an Neichiko blossom, how thoughtful. Another might praise the color of the paper or the elegant knot. This is the preliminary appraisal, the judgment of the container. But then, the knot is carefully untied, and the paper is unfolded. And now, the true test begins. Before they even read the words of your 57577 syllable poem, they will scrutinize the one thing that reveals everything, your calligraphy. In 11th century Japan, handwriting was not just handwriting. It was a cardiogram of the soul. The art of calligraphy, or SHO, the way of the brush, was considered the ultimate visual expression of a person's character, education, and inner spirit. A person with beautiful, confident, and graceful handwriting was assumed to be a beautiful, confident, and graceful person. Conversely, clumsy, weak, or childish handwriting was seen as an unmistakable sign of a clumsy, weak, or childish soul. Your romantic future could be over before a single word of your poem is even processed, all because your brushstrokes have looked a little shaky. They are looking for life in your characters. They want to see if your strokes flow with energy and confidence, or if they look hesitant and cramped. They assess if there is a good balance on the page, or if the characters look jumbled and chaotic, or if the ink has a rich, deep blackness, or if it is a watery, pale gray that suggests impatience. A single character could be a symphony of subtle details, the sharp, decisive flick at the end of a horizontal stroke, the delicate, tapering tail of a downward curve. It was a full-body analysis conducted from a distance. Here is a fascinating layer to this. While educated men were often trained in the formal, blocky Chinese characters, mana, the women of the court perfected a flowing, cursive script called kana, specifically hiragana. This script, which was simpler and more phonetic, was initially looked down upon by male scholars as women's hand on nadi. But it was this very script that allowed for the explosion of Japanese literature, as it was perfectly suited to capturing the nuances of their own spoken language and emotion. So you, the male suitor, are writing in a script that the women are considered the ultimate masters of. They are judging you on their home turf. The debate still flickers in academic circles about what this really meant. Was beautiful calligraphy truly an innate reflection of a person's spirit, or was it simply a learned skill, a product of immense privilege? Think about it. To develop a masterful hand, you needed years of leisure time, expensive tutors, and access to the finest paper, brushes, and ink. A provincial warrior might have a heart full of poetry, but if he spent his youth learning to wield a sword instead of a brush, his handwriting would likely be terrible. The court's obsession with calligraphy, some historians argue, was another form of sophisticated gatekeeping. By defining good character by a skill that only the elite had the resources to cultivate, they created a self-reinforcing system where good taste and high birth were seen as one and the same. They question if they were really reading the soul or just reading the bank account. As the ladies huddle around your letter, they are performing this exact analysis. One might complain his strokes are too forceful, suggesting arrogance. Or, in a more disastrous scenario, another might say the characters are so uneven. He must have been drunk when he wrote this. Yes, that was a real concern, but if you have done your job, the comments will be ones of admiration. The head lady in waiting might murmur, impressed, about the flow, saying there is no hesitation and that he seems to be a man of great sensitivity and resolve. Only after your handwriting has passed this intense inspection will they finally turn their attention to the content of the poem itself. If your calligraphy was deemed worthy, they will read your words with a generous eye, already predisposed to like you. If your calligraphy was a mess, they will read your poem looking for flaws, assuming the sentiment must be as clumsy as the strokes. You have just passed the first, and perhaps most important gate. Your soul, as seen through your handwriting, has been deemed acceptable. Now, they must decide if your mind is as beautiful. The door slides shut behind your messenger, and the silence he leaves in his wake is heavier than any sound. The task is done. The fragile vessel carrying your hopes has been launched. And now you enter a special kind of purgatory known only to poets and lovers, the waiting. At first, there is a sense of relief, even pride. You did it. You composed the poem, selected the paper, chose the perfect flower. You feel confident in your creation. You imagine the scene on the other end, the ladies admiring your calligraphy, murmuring their approval. You picture the mistress herself, a graceful silhouette behind her screen, a thoughtful finger resting on her chin, as she considers the depth of your metaphor. In your mind, she is already charmed. Her reply, you think, will be swift. You try to go about your day. You practice your flute, but the notes sound hollow and distracted. You pull out a scroll of Chinese poetry, but the characters swim before your eyes, meaningless shapes. Every task feels trivial. Your entire being has narrowed to a single point of focus, the gate. Your ears are tuned to the sound of footsteps on the gravel path outside. You wonder if that was him. No, just a delivery cart rumbling by. You wonder if that was his voice. No, just a gardener trimming the hedges. As the sun crawls across the sky, a new feeling begins to creep in, cold and insidious. Doubt. You start to second-guess everything. The lotus leaf poem, you wonder if it was too obvious or worse, if it was too obscure. Maybe she did not understand the subtext. Maybe she thought you were just really interested in horticulture. And an aged Shiko flower. A terrible choice. It is a summer flower. Yes, but maybe her family has a tragic history associated with Nate Shiko. You have no way of knowing. You have just committed a terrible, unforgivable faux pas. Your social life is over. You will have to become a monk and retreat to a mountain monastery. This agonizing weight is not just in your head. It is part of the etiquette. There was a generally understood, though unwritten, timetable for replies. A quick response, sent back the same day, was an excellent sign. It showed eagerness and interest. A reply sent the next morning was also perfectly acceptable, suggesting thoughtful consideration. But if a full day and a second night passed with no word, the prognosis was grim. To leave a letter unanswered for 2 days was a clear, though gentle, rejection. To never reply at all was the ultimate snub, a brutal and humiliating dismissal. So you are not just waiting for a letter, you are watching a clock that ticks with your reputation. This is where you might be tempted by a rather peculiar, but common, practice for easing anxiety, divination. When the stress became too much, it was not unheard of for a nervous suitor to discreetly consult an omniyogi, a master of yin-yang divination. These mystics were a powerful force in the Heian court, advising the emperor on auspicious dates for events and performing rituals to ward off evil spirits. For a private citizen like you, a visit might involve asking for a forecast, like if today is an auspicious day for a message to arrive. The diviner might cast yarrow stalks or consult complex cosmological charts and tell you that the signs are unfavorable in the east until the hour of the monkey. Be patient. It was a way of imposing order on the terrifying randomness of human emotion. This intense emotional turmoil, this performance of love sickness, is a hallmark of Heian literature. In the tale of Genji, men and women alike are constantly sighing, weeping into their sleeves, and composing miserable poems about the agony of waiting for a message. This has led to a fascinating historical debate. Was this an accurate depiction of how people actually felt? Or was it a literary trope, a kind of performative suffering? Did you, the young aristocrat, genuinely feel like your world would end if she did not reply? Or did you feel that way because all the stories and poems you had ever read told you that this is how a man in love is supposed to feel? Some scholars argue that expressing this extreme emotional vulnerability was part of the art form itself. It was proof of your sensitivity. To be cool and unbothered by the weight would not be a sign of strength, but of a shallow heart, incapable of deep feeling. You were not just waiting for a letter, you were living out a scene from a poem. The sun sets. The oil lamps are lit, casting long, dancing shadows on the paper screens. The night is always the worst part of the wait. The world grows quiet, leaving you alone with the frantic drumbeat of your own heart. Every creak of the floorboards in your own house sounds like an approaching footstep. You lie on your pallet, but sleep refuses to come. You stare at the ceiling, replaying every choice, composing a dozen different imaginary replies from her in your head. One is witty and encouraging. The next is cold and dismissive. Then you hear it, a distinct sound from beyond your gate. A cloth. The soft crunch of gravel under us, and a leadful. It is not a gardener. It is too late for a delivery cart. It is the step of a single person, arriving in the deep of the night. Your heart leaps into your throat. You sit up, straining to listen. You wonder if it is your messenger returning empty-handed with the tale of failure, or if it is someone else, a servant from her household carrying a reply. The footsteps stop. There is a moment of perfect, absolute silence. And then a soft voice calls out. The voice at the gate confirms it. A messenger has arrived from the household of the Minister of the Right. Your heart is a complicated maneuver somewhere in your chest that is equal parts relief and sheer terror. She has replied. The silence is broken. But the game has now entered its most cerebral and dangerous phase, interpretation. The letter is brought to you. It is, you note with a practiced eye, an object of immense beauty and care. The paper is a delicate, pale violet, a color often associated with aristocratic grace and, poetically, with connections and relationships. The fold is an immaculate knot, and tucked into it is not a flower, but a single perfect maple leaf, just beginning to show the first blush of autumn color on its edges. Your mind races. A maple leaf. Your poem was about summer rain. She is responding to your summer poem with an autumn image. What does it mean? You wonder if she is out of sync with your feelings, or if she is subtly correcting your seasonal awareness, or if she is doing something far more clever. You carefully untie the knot, your fingers feeling clumsy and thick. You unroll the paper. Her calligraphy, as rumored, is breathtaking. It flows across the page like water, elegant, confident, and full of personality. It is a work of art in itself. This alone is a good sign. If she intended to dismiss you, she would not have wasted her best brushwork on you. Then you read the poem. It is, like yours, a waka of 31 syllables. It might say something like this. The dew on the leaf you saw in your summer garden was merely water. Wait for the coming autumn to see the true colors shine. You read it once, twice, a third time. Your brain, already frayed from the anxiety of waiting, is now working at full capacity, trying to decrypt the layers of meaning packed into this tiny poem. This is not a simple thank you for your letter. This is a literary puzzle, a test of your intelligence and poetic sensitivity. Let us break it down. First, the direct response. She acknowledges your poem, the dew on the leaf you saw in your summer garden. She got the reference. She understood your metaphor. Check. Next, the critique was merely water. This is a brilliant, devastatingly subtle burn. She is gently mocking your sentimentality. She is saying that dead rip you were being so dramatic about. It is just water. It is a common, everyday thing. On the surface, it feels like a rejection, a dismissal of your poetic efforts. A less perceptive man might be crushed by this line. He would think the conversation is over. But then comes the final two lines, the pivot that changes everything. Wait for the coming autumn to see the true colors shine. This is the invitation. She has taken your simple, summery image of a deadrip and replaced it with her own, more complex, autumnal image of a maple leaf turning color. She is telling you several things at once. She is saying your opening move was nice, but a bit simple. Let us talk about something more profound. She is also suggesting that true beauty, and perhaps a true connection, is not something that appears in a fleeting, sentimental moment like a deadrip, but something that develops over time and reveals its depth in a different season like the turning of the leaves. The most exciting interpretation is that she is creating a narrative with you. She has taken your opening line and has written the second verse. She is inviting you to continue the story. The unspoken message is, I am not an easy prize to be won with a single, pretty poem about dew. If you are serious, you will have to be patient. You will have to prove your worth over time. Stick with me until the autumn, and you might see something truly special. This kind of elusive exchange, where one poem caps another, is a central feature of Heian literary culture. It is known as Honkei Dori, or elusive variation. The idea is to take a well-known poem, in this case your own, and build upon it, changing its meaning or deepening its emotional resonance. Her ability to do this so skillfully is a demonstration of her own poetic power. She is not just a passive recipient of your art. She is your equal, and perhaps even your superior in this game. This brings up a fascinating point of debate for historians. How much of this was a genuine meeting of the minds, and how much was a performance coached by others? When you received her poem, was it purely from her heart and mind, or was it a collaborative effort, workshopped with her ladies-in-waiting, the famous diary writers of the era, like Murasaki, Shikibu, and Daisei Shonajion, often described scenes where the ladies of the house would gather to dissect a man's letter and help their mistress compose the perfect reply. One might suggest a particular classical allusion, another might critique a turn of phrase. This does not necessarily diminish the lady's own talent. In a culture that valued collaboration and tradition, this kind of group effort was seen as natural. It raises the question, though, are you in a poetic duel with a single woman, or with an entire committee of highly educated, artistically ruthless women? The thought is both terrifying and exhilarating. For now, you do not care. You hold her letter, this masterpiece of subtle flirtation and intellectual challenge. You have your answer. It is not a simple yes. It is a perhaps. It is an invitation to try harder, to be better, to be more patient. She has not just sent you a reply. She has given you an assignment. Your next poem will have to be even better. It will have to acknowledge her auto-metaphor and take it to the next level. The game is afoot, and she has just raised the stakes. You are utterly, completely hooked. The violet paper feels warm in your hand, a fragile trophy from your first successful skirmish. Her poem, a masterpiece of cool challenge, is already memorized. But the words on the page are only half the story. To truly understand her message, you need the footnotes, the director's commentary. And for that, you must turn to the person who just delivered it, the messenger. But he was not just her delivery boy. He was your spy. You summon your own servant, the young boy you sent out what feels like a lifetime ago. He enters, bows low, his face a perfect mask of youthful professionalism. He is probably no more than 15, but he understands the gravity of his role. He knows that his observations from the last hour are more valuable to you than a dozen poems. You do not just ask if he delivered it. You conduct a full debriefing. You tell him to tell you everything, from the moment he reached the gate. And he begins his report. He tells you that when he arrived at the gate of the Minister of the Right's sprawling compound, he was not kept waiting. The gatekeeper, seeing the emblem of your family on his livery, sent for an attendant immediately. This is a good sign. It shows respect. Then comes the first crucial detail: who received the letter from him. He says it was not a lowly kitchen servant or a gruff guard. No, he tells you that a woman came to the receiving parlor, a lady of some standing, judging by the quality of her silk robes. She did not snatch the letter from his hand. She took it with a grace and seriousness that indicated the importance of the delivery. He could not see her face, of course, she was behind a small screen, but he could judge by her voice and her movements. Next, you ask about the atmosphere. You ask what he heard. The boy hesitates for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He tells you that after the lady took the letter and disappeared into the inner quarters, there was a long period of silence. But then he heard a faint sound, muffled by layers of paper and silk, a ripple of soft, controlled laughter. It was not mocking laughter. It was, he thought, the sound of excitement, of pleasant surprise. This is gold, pure gold. Her poem might be cool and reserved, but the reaction of her entourage was warm. This suggests that your advance was not unwelcome. It was, in fact, an event. And now for a truly bizarre but critically important piece of intelligence, a tidbit of Heian era etiquette that seems baffling to us. You ask your servant how they treated him, and he tells you that while he was waiting for the reply, he was not left to stand in the dusty courtyard. He was shown to a small, clean waiting room and was brought a cup of tea and a small, sweet rice cake. This is not just simple hospitality. It is a signal. To treat a suitor's messenger well was to show respect for the suitor himself. To give him a sweet cake was a subtle, almost playful, sign of encouragement. If they had intended to reject you, they would have left him standing outside in the sun for an hour before sending him away with a curt dismissal. The rice cake is almost as important as the poem. It is the physical proof that accompanies the poetic metaphor. It is the behind-the-scenes confirmation that their official coolness is just a posture. This reliance on servants as intelligence gatherers opens up a fascinating historical debate. Historians have long been fascinated by the ambiguous position of these servants. They were low-status individuals who moved freely through the highest echelons of power, carrying the most sensitive information. This made them incredibly influential. So the question is, where did their loyalties truly lie? Was your boy completely loyal to you, reporting everything with perfect accuracy? Or could he be swayed? A rival suitor could easily bribe your messenger to lie about the reception, to tell you the letter was met with scorn, hoping to discourage you. A clever lady-in-waiting could slip the messenger a few coins to embellish his report, to make her mistress seem even more sought after than she was. Some historical accounts suggest that these messengers were masters of playing both sides, acting as freelance information brokers, their loyalty for sale to the highest bidder. Others argue that, for the most part, the bonds of loyalty between a master and a trusted servant were incredibly strong, a core part of the social fabric. There probably is not a single answer. It likely varied from household to household, from person to person, but it adds a thrilling layer of uncertainty to the entire process. You have to trust your spy, knowing full well that he might be a double agent. You look at your young servant who has now finished his report. You choose to trust him. The pieces are all falling into place. You now have a complete picture, a three-dimensional view of your standing. You have her poem, cool, intelligent, and challenging. And you have the context, the respectful reception, the excited whispers, the symbolic rice cake. Her poem says, "Impress me." The context says we are ready to be impressed. Without the messenger's report, you might have misinterpreted her poem as a gentle rejection. You might have felt discouraged by its cool tone. But with his intelligence, you can read between the lines. You understand that her coolness is part of the performance. She is maintaining her reputation as a woman of high standards, who does not give her affections away easily. But behind that carefully constructed facade, there is interest. There is potential. You dismiss the boy with a nod of gratitude, perhaps giving him a coin for his excellent work. You are no longer just a poet lost in a world of metaphors. You are a strategist armed with vital intelligence. And now, you can begin to formulate your countermove. Your next letter will not just be a response to her poem. It will be a response to the entire situation, a move that shows you understood not only her words, but the whispers behind the screen as well. The game has changed. Your first poem was a speculative probe, a message in a bottle tossed into the vast, silent ocean of the court. Her reply was the echo from a distant shore, proof that someone was listening. Now the exchange is no longer speculative. It is a direct conversation, albeit one conducted through layers of metaphor and silk. The distance between you has been halved. The stakes have doubled. You cannot just send back another pretty observation about nature. She already dismissed your dead drop as merely water. To reply with another generic seasonal poem would be to fail her test. She challenged you to wait for autumn to see the true colors. You must meet her on that ground, but elevate it. You must take her autumn metaphor and make it personal. This is where you must tap into one of the most profound, and perhaps most defining concepts of your culture, mono no aware. It is a phrase that is notoriously difficult to translate. It means something like the pathos of things, or a gentle sadness at the transience of life. It is not depression or misery. It is the deep, poignant feeling you get when you see the cherry blossoms in full bloom, knowing that their breathtaking beauty is a fleeting spectacle that will be gone in a week. It is the bittersweet ache of a perfect autumn evening, beautiful precisely because it heralds the coming of winter. Her poem, with its reference to the changing leaves, was steeped in this feeling. Your reply must show that you understand it not just as an idea, but as an experience. Use it with your inkstone, but instead of rushing to compose, you let the idea steep. Autumn, true colors, longer nights. A new poem begins to surface, connecting her imagery to a feeling of personal longing. You are no longer just an observer of the world. You are a man living in it, a man who feels the chill of the evening. After several drafts, you settle on something. The poem might be, you speak of the splendor of autumn's brocaded leaves, a truth I cannot deny. But with that beauty comes the chill of endless nights, and I wonder. You leave the last line hanging, a 7-syllable void filled with unspoken questions. I wonder who will keep me company. I wonder will your poems be a light in the coming darkness. I wonder are you lonely too. You have taken her intellectual challenge and responded with a direct, emotional appeal. You have changed the subject from the leaves to the feeling the leaves evoke. You have shifted the conversation from it to us. This is a huge risk. You wonder if it is too direct, too needy. In a culture that values subtlety above all else, you question if you are being clumsy. The memory of your speech report, the laughter, the rice cake, is your only anchor of confidence. It's a gesture to warmth that her poem concealed. You are betting that her formal coolness was a mask, and this poem is your attempt to speak to the person behind it. Here we encounter a curious practical problem of these poetic duels, something modern scholars call topic exhaustion. If you both just kept volleying poems about maple leaves, the exchange would grow stale. Your leaf is red. Yes, but your poem about my red leaf makes my own leaf seem even redder. It could become an endless and ultimately boring loop of politeness. A skilled poet knew when to pivot, when to introduce a new theme, more and more personal emotion to keep the exchange alive and escalating. You are hoping this is that pivot. This very escalation is a point of contention for academics. When the poems turn from nature to personal longing, they question if we are witnessing the authentic blossoming of love or if we are simply watching two skilled players advance to the next level of the game. They debate if expressing longing was a genuine emotional revelation, or if it was a strategic move, like advancing a pawn in chess, dictated by the established rules of courtship. Some historians argue that the performance and the feeling were one and the same. In a world where all emotion was expressed through rigid artistic forms, to perform the role of a pining lover was to be a pining lover. The artifice did not negate the emotion, it was the only acceptable channel for it. You, sitting there, feel the line blur. The strategic need to advance the conversation is tangled up with a genuine, growing curiosity and affection for this woman of wit and taste. You make your decision. You will send the riskier poem. You choose your paper with even greater care this time. Not the cool violet she sent you, but a warmer, deeper russet color, the color of a late autumn sunset. For the attachment, you find a perfect sprig of chrysanthemum, a classic autumn flower. Yes, but one that also carries connotations of endurance and, in some contexts, a quiet, lingering hope. As you hand the new letter to your messenger, you feel a different kind of anxiety. The first weight was about acceptance or rejection. This weight is about connection. You wonder if she will accept your shift into the personal, or if she will retreat, put the formal screen back up, and reply with another impersonal poem about the moon. You have laid a piece of your own vulnerability on her doorstep. Now you must wait in the ever-lengthening nights to see if she will, in her own brilliant way, offer you a light. Your risky poem, with its hint of personal loneliness, has been dispatched. The wait this time is different. It is less about social success and more about personal connection. You are not just hoping for a reply. You are hoping for a specific kind of reply, one that accepts your invitation into a more intimate emotional space. When the messenger from her house returns, he carries with him not only a letter but also a new, more significant sign of encouragement. There is no rice cake this time. Instead, her messenger passes on a verbal message, relayed through your servant. The message is from her chief lady in waiting, a woman who is, for all intents and purposes, her Secretary of State, her press secretary, and her bodyguard, all rolled into one. The message is simple. My lady has noted the chill in the air as well. She finds your thoughts on the chrysanthemums compelling. This is a breakthrough. She is no longer speaking only through the filter of her own poetry. She has allowed her spokeswoman to offer a direct, albeit still formal, piece of encouragement. But this victory immediately presents you with a new and far more complex obstacle. You have impressed the lady. Now you must win over her court. A noblewoman in the Heian court was not an individual, but the center of a small, fiercely loyal constellation of attendants, ladies in waiting, and female relatives. These women, known as NYOBO, were her constant companions. They slept in the same room, helped her dress, read to her, and most importantly, served as her first line of defense against the outside world, especially against men like you. To get to her, you have to get through them. You realize that your poetic correspondence is not just being read by your intended, it is being scrutinized, analyzed, and debated by a committee of sharp-witted, highly educated women. They are the ones who will ultimately decide if you are worthy of a more direct encounter. Winning their approval is not just a nice bonus, it is a prerequisite. So how do you do it? You cannot send them poems directly. That would be inappropriate. The courtship must maintain the fiction that it is only between you and their mistress. Your strategy must be more subtle. You begin to tailor your correspondence with this secondary audience in mind. Your next poem might contain a clever literary allusion that you know only a truly educated person would catch. While the lady herself will appreciate it, her attendants will be doubly impressed. They will see it as a sign of respect for their intellect. You are signaling that you are not just trying to flatter their mistress. You are playing on their level. You might also start including small, thoughtful gifts. Not for the lady herself, that is still to forward, but for her entourage. Perhaps you send a collection of rare, beautifully colored papers, with a note attached to your beloved, of course, saying that you thought she might enjoy sharing them with her companions for their own writing. Or you might send a box of exquisite, blended incense with a poem that praises her taste, implicitly acknowledging that she has taught her attendants well. These are not bribes. They are sophisticated compliments, gestures of miyabi that honor the entire household. This brings up a fascinating piece of social machinery from the period. The role of the older, more experienced ladies-in-waiting. These were often women who had served the family for years, who had seen dozens of suitors come and go. They were masters of etiquette and politics, and their judgment was paramount. One such figure was the Meino-tu, the lady's former wet nurse. The bond between a noble child and her Meino-tu was often one of the most powerful and loving relationships in her life, sometimes even stronger than the bond with her own mother. The Meino-tu was a confidant, a protector, and a fierce advocate. If you could win her over, you had a powerful ally in your corner. Her quiet word of approval to the lady's father could be more effective than 100 perfect poems. Scholars often debate the true nature of the relationship between a mistress and her NYOBO. Was it a simple employer-employee dynamic? Or was it something more like a family, a sorority, a strategic alliance? The diaries of the era suggest it was a complex mix of all three. There was friendship, loyalty, and genuine affection. But there was also hierarchy, jealousy, and competition. A lady-in-waiting who successfully championed a promising suitor could see her own status rise when her mistress made a good match. One who backed a loser could find her own position weakened. So when they read your poems, they are not just thinking about their mistress's happiness. They are also calculating their own future prospects. You are not just auditioning to be a lover. You are auditioning to be a patron. Your strategy seems to be working. The replies from her continue to be encouraging. The verbal messages relayed by the messengers become warmer. One day, the message might be, "My lady's attendants enjoyed the scent of the incense you sent very much. They said it reminded them of a famous poem about the autumn mist." They are telling you that your gifts have been received and appreciated. They are telling you that you are being discussed. You are no longer just an anonymous suitor. You are becoming a character in the daily drama of their cloistered world. You are making progress. You have charmed the critics. The next logical step, the one that makes your heart pound with a mixture of excitement and dread, is to move from the abstract world of paper and into the physical world of her presence. The time has come to request a meeting. The poetic conversation has reached its natural limit. You have exchanged verses on the seasons, alluded to classic texts, and hinted at personal loneliness. Her entourage has been charmed by your thoughtful gifts and your impeccable taste. You have received enough encouragement, through messengers and metaphors, to believe that the next, audacious step will not be rejected. The time has come to stop talking about the chill of the evening and actually venture out into it. You must arrange a secret visit. This is not a casual "I will swing by around 8. A nocturnal visit, or yobiai, literally night crawling, was a highly ritualized and incredibly risky undertaking. This was not a date. It was more like a clandestine infiltration, steeped in etiquette and fraught with peril. A single misstep could lead to utter humiliation for you and ruin for her. First, you must request permission, but you cannot just ask directly. Your next poem must be the one. It needs to be your boldest yet. You might compose a verse that talks about the barrier of a dream, how you see her in your sleep but are tormented by the dawn that separates you. The subtext is clear: you wish to make the dream a reality. You are asking to cross the threshold from the imaginary into the real. You send this poem with more anxiety than ever before. This is not a test of your wit. It is a direct proposal for a physical meeting. Rejection at this stage would be definitive. The silence that follows is agonizing, but then the reply counts. It is, as always, a poem. It might be something coy and non-committal like, "The path in your dream is shrouded in morning mist. Who could hope to find it? Only a brave and skillful guide would not lose his way at night." It is not a yes. It is not a no. It is a challenge and a set of coded instructions. She is saying the path is difficult and secret, but she is also implying that a brave and skillful guide might just be able to find his way. She might have even included a subtle landmark, a reference to a specific type of tree in her garden, or the sound of a particular stream, a clue that only a person who has been paying excruciating attention would understand. The arrangement is made, not through direct words, but through these allusions and, crucially, through back-channel communications between your most trusted servant and her most trusted lady-in-waiting. Your man meets with her woman in some neutral, discreet location, perhaps a quiet corner of a temple market. There, the practical details are whispered. Tonight, after the hour of the red midnight, the northern gate to the garden will be unlatched. A single lamp will burn in the western wing. Come alone. As darkness falls, you prepare for the most important journey of your life. You bathe and perfume yourself with your finest incense. You dress in soft, dark robes that will not rustle too loudly. You are not dressing to be seen, it will be almost completely dark, but your scent will announce your presence. This is where a very specific and rather strange piece of Heian culture comes into play. You, as a dashing young nobleman, might wear a tall, lacquered black hat called an Ibu's hai. To go out at night on a romantic escapade, you might wear a special softened version of this hat, one that could be folded and tucked away. It was a subtle sartorial signal that you were not out on official business. Your hat itself signaled your amorous intent. You slip out of your own compound, accompanied only by your one trusted servant, who acts as your lookout. The streets of Heian Kyo are dark and deserted. The city at night is a different world, one of shadows and secrets. You move silently, your heart pounding with a rhythm that seems to echo off the silent walls of the grand residences you pass. You reach her family's compound. As promised, a small, unassuming side gate is unlocked. Your servant gives you a final encouraging nod and melts back into the shadows to keep watch. You are on your own. You slip into the garden. It is a landscape of black shapes and silvery moonlight. The air is cool and smells of damp moss and night blooming flowers. You follow the whispered instructions, your senses on high alert. You see it, a single faint glow from behind a paper screen. That is your destination. This is the point of maximum danger, and it highlights a fascinating debate among historians. Was this secrecy all just part of a romantic game, a theatrical performance that everyone tacitly understood, or was the danger of discovery very, very real? The answer is both. While the lady and her attendants had obviously consented and prepared for your arrival, her father and brothers had almost certainly not. If you were discovered by a male member of the family, the consequences would be dire. You could be beaten, challenged to a duel, or, at the very least, disgraced so thoroughly that your career at court would be over. The family's honor would demand a severe reaction. So while your arrival was expected by some, it had to remain a perfect secret from others, turning the house into a labyrinth of allies and potential enemies. You reach the veranda of the western wing. You slide the heavy wooden shutter aside, a sound that seems deafeningly loud in the stillness. You slip inside, and you find yourself not in her arms, but in a small, darkened chamber, face to face with her chief lady-in-waiting, who holds a single tiny lamp. She looks you up and down, her expression unreadable. You have breached the outer defenses. Now you must face the final guard at the gate. You stand in the near darkness, the air thick with the scent of her private incense blended your own thundering heartbeat. The lady-in-waiting, the stern gatekeeper you finally have to face in person, holds the single oil lamp, its light flickering across her formal, unimpressed expression. She has led you to the threshold of the main room, where you know her mistress is waiting just on the other side of a standing screen, a kicho. You cannot see her, but you can feel her presence. This is it, the culmination of weeks of poetry and politics. But you do not just stride in. The romance of this moment is governed by an etiquette as rigid and complex as any court ceremony. This is not a passionate, spontaneous union. It is a carefully choreographed dance in the dark. The first thing you must do is acknowledge the lady in waiting. You might utter a quiet, formal compliment. You might murmur that the scent of these rooms is as elegant as the poetry they inspire. It is a line that praises both the servant and the mistress. She might offer a cool nod in return, her duty to be skeptical and protective until the very end. She then gestures for you to proceed. You move past her into the main chamber. It is profoundly dark. The only light is the faint glow from the single lamp in the antechamber and perhaps a sliver of moonlight, filtering through a gap in the shutters. Your eyes slowly adjust, but you can only make out shapes and shadows, the faint outline of a brazier, the dark mass of a chest for storing robes, and the imposing form of the kicho, the screen of state behind which she sits. You still cannot see her. You are expected to sit down on a cushion placed for you on your side of the screen. And then you speak, but you do not speak to her directly. The lady in waiting acts as an intermediary, a facilitator for the first few moments of the conversation. The attendant might say from her position near the screen that my lady is honored by your visit. You reply to the attendant, your voice perhaps a little unsteady, that the honor is all mine, and that you have braved the darkness hoping to find a light that outshines the moon. This is how the first few exchanges happen, a strange, three-way conversation where the main participants are separated by a wall of silk. It is awkward, it is formal, it is designed to slowly break down the immense barrier of propriety that has separated you for so long. Eventually, after a few of these carefully scripted pleasantries, the lady in waiting will discreetly withdraw, melting back into the shadows of the antechamber, leaving the two of you alone. Now, you can finally speak to her. You still cannot see her, and she cannot see you. You are two voices in the dark, separated by a thin but absolute barrier. You might talk about the poems you have exchanged. You might compliment her again on the cleverness of her last reply. She might respond with a soft, musical voice that you are hearing for the first time without the filter of messengers. Her words will be as carefully chosen as the ones in her letters. This strange, disembodied conversation is where a fascinating and somewhat bizarre detail of Heian romance comes into play. It was at this stage that the man might be permitted to gently touch her sleeve. Not her hand, not her all. Just the edge of her robe, which, as you know, would have been artfully arranged to spill out from underneath the bottom of the screen. This was a moment of profound intimacy. To touch the fabric that had touched her skin was a powerful, symbolic act. It was the first, tentative bridge across the physical divide. After some time, if all is going well, the ultimate moment arrives. The man is expected to gently, respectfully pull the kicho aside. Or, in some accounts, the lady herself might signal her consent, and one of her attendants would silently glide and unmove it for her. The screen is moved, and in the oppressive darkness you are finally in the same space, but you still cannot see her face. It was considered the height of bad manners, a sign of abortion and unrefined character, for a man to try and get a clear look at the woman's face during this first nocturnal visit. To stare openly would be a violation of the mystery you have both so carefully cultivated. She would likely be holding a fan, a high OGI in front of her face, or using the sleeve of her robe to shield herself. This is a point that endlessly fascinates and puzzles historians. They question what consummation of the relationship actually meant in this context. The literature is famously coy on the subject. Diaries and tales speak of spending the night together, of the dawn coming too soon, but the specific mechanics are almost always left to the reader's imagination. Some scholars argue that the first night might have involved little more than chaste conversation and the symbolic sharing of a sleeping space. Others believe that a physical relationship was the expected outcome, but that it was conducted with a level of discretion and decorum, in near total darkness, that is foreign to our modern sensibilities. The act itself was less important than the symbolic agreement to share a night, a space, a secret. The true consummation was the poem you were required to write the next morning. So you spend the night together, a union of silhouettes and scents and whispered words. You are finally with the woman you have pursued for weeks, but she remains a mystery and an elegant shadow in the gloom. The experience is intimate and yet profoundly impersonal. You have been admitted to her chambers, but not yet, it feels, into her full confidence. The final test is yet to come. The first rays of dawn begin to filter through the shutters, and you know that the most critical performance of the entire courtship is just a few hours away. The first pale, gray light of dawn is a cruel intruder. It signals the end of your clandestine night and the beginning of the most high-stakes, nerve-wracking ritual in the entire courtship process, the departure and the subsequent morning after letter. This was not just a polite thank you note, it was a testament to your sincerity, a proof of your poetic talent under pressure, and the single most important factor in determining whether you would ever be invited back. Etiquette demanded that the man leave before the household was fully awake, while the morning mist still clung to the gardens. To be seen leaving by a member of the lady's family would be a catastrophe. Your departure had to be as stealthy as your arrival. There was no lingering, no fond farewell. There was a hurried, whispered exchange in the gloom, the rustle of silk robes, and then you were slipping back out into the chilly air, your mind a whirlwind of sensations and anxieties. This prescribed pre-dawn departure, known as Kinyu-ji and UNOWAKR, or the silk-on-silk parting, was a moment steeped in poetic melancholy. The name itself evokes the image of the lovers reluctantly separating from the shared robes or quilts under which they had spent the night. It was meant to be poignant and a little sad, a perfect subject for poetry. And that was convenient because you had a poem to write. Immediately. You could not go home, have a cup of tea, and think about it. The pressure was on to compose and dispatch your morning after poem, the Aitio no Fumi, as quickly as humanly possible. To delay was a sign of disrespect or, even worse, a lack of genuine feeling. It would imply that the night had been forgettable, a mere conquest. A swift, beautiful poem, on the other hand, proved that your mind was still overflowing with the emotions of the night. So you might retreat to a discreet corner of her family's own garden, or perhaps duck into a nearby temple with a servant who had dutifully waited for you all night, carrying a portable writing kit. You had to produce a masterpiece while sleep-deprived, emotionally wrought, and shivering in the morning cold. This poem had to be a perfect blend of passion and elegance. It needed to capture the sorrow of parting and the lingering sweetness of the encounter, all while remaining impeccably tasteful. You could not be crude. You could not say, "Last night was amazing." Instead, you had to channel that feeling through a suitable natural metaphor. For instance, you might look at the heavy dew on the chrysanthemums in the garden and compose a verse like this. Was it your sleeve that brushed against this flower, leaving it so drenched? Or was it just the weeping of the endless, lonely dawn? Let us dissect this. You have brilliantly combined a memory of the night, her sleeve, a symbol of your proximity to her, with the scene in front of you, the dew-soaked flower. You have also expressed your sorrow at leaving, the weeping of the lonely dawn, without sounding pathetic. It is romantic, it is immediate, and it demonstrates that even after a night of passion, your poetic sensibilities are as sharp as ever. It says, "I am still in the moment with you, even though I have left." This poem was then dispatched back to her, often before you had even made it back to your own home. And on her end, the ritual was just as intense. She, too, was expected to reply almost immediately with her own Kinyu-ji in your poem. The exchange was a rapid-fire volley of shared sentiment. She and her ladies would be waiting anxiously for your letter. Its arrival would be a moment of triumph. Its absence, a source of deep shame and disappointment. A man who failed to send a morning after letter was known as a Toria Iu no Otoko, a man of haste, who took what he wanted and fled, a cad of the highest order. This brings us to a wonderfully odd and specific detail of Heian life, the potential for a mistaken delivery. With so many clandestine affairs happening across the capital, and so many servants rushing around in the pre-dawn gloom with urgent love poems, mix-ups were bound to happen. Imagine the horror. Your passionate poem intended for the minister of the right's daughter is accidentally delivered to a grumpy old dowager empress 2 blocks away. Or worse, you receive a beautiful, heartfelt reply to your poem, only to realize later that it came from the wrong house entirely. This very scenario is a plot point in the tale of Genji, highlighting that it was a real and mortifying possibility. The pressure to produce a brilliant ATO Nofumi has led to a debate among literary historians. They wonder how spontaneous these poems were really. Were they truly composed in a sleep-deprived, emotional rush in a cold garden, or did clever suitors prepare a few all-purpose morning-after poems in advance, just in case? The romantic ideal, of course, is that they were born of pure, unadulterated feeling. But the pragmatic reality is that having a couple of high-quality, adaptable verses up your sleeve would have been a very smart strategy. The answer is likely that it was a mix of both. A truly skilled poet could probably improvise something beautiful, while a less confident man might rely on a pre-written template, subtly tweaking it to fit the specific flower of the season. Your poem arrives. It is received, read, and admired by her and her committee of ladies. The speed of its arrival is noted. The elegance of its sentiment is approved. Her own reply is composed and sent back to you. It might speak of how the memory of your scent still lingers on her robes. The circle is complete. You have passed the final, most crucial test of the first visit. You have proven that you are not just a nighttime crawler, but a man of deep feeling and impeccable taste. A man who understands that the art of leaving is just as important as the art of arriving. You have done it. You navigated the darkness, whispered the right words, and composed a morning-after poem that was a triumph of speed and sentiment. Her reply was equally swift and beautiful. You should be basking in the glow of success, but a new kind of pressure begins to settle in. A single night, no matter how successful, does not make a relationship. It is an audition, and now you have to prove it was not a fluke. Welcome to the unwritten law of the 3-night visit. In the intricate social calculus of the Heian court, a one-night encounter was little more than a promising rumor. For a relationship to be considered real, for it to gain any kind of legitimacy in the eyes of the lady and her family, the suitor had to return on the second night, and then again on the third night, consecutively. This was not a suggestion. It was the universally understood protocol. The second night is in many ways more stressful than the first. The novelty is gone, replaced by the heavy burden of expectation. You sneak back to her residence, your heart pounding just as hard, but for a different reason. The first night, you feared rejection. Tonight, you fear disappointing her. You have to prove that your charm, your wit, and your sensitivity are consistent. On her end, the waiting is even more fraught with anxiety. On the first night, she risked a secret. On the second, she is risking her reputation within her own household. She and her ladies have granted you access. If you fail to appear, the shame is not yours alone. It is theirs. The gate will be left unlatched for you. The lamp will be lit. They will wait, listening in the darkness. To not show up on the second night is a devastating, silent insult. It declares, without a single word, that the first night was a disappointment, and you have no wish to repeat it. It is a brutal ghosting 11th century style. But you do show up. You are greeted, perhaps, with a little less formality and a little more warmth by the lady in waiting. The conversation in the dark is easier, more familiar. The third night follows in the same pattern. By the time you slip into her garden for the third consecutive visit, the air has changed completely. You are no longer an intruder. You are an expected guest. The ladies in waiting might even offer you a quiet, knowing smile. You have proven your commitment. This 3-night custom is a source of considerable debate among historians. They question if it was a romantic tradition, designed to give the couple time to form a genuine bond before their relationship became public, or if it was something far more pragmatic, a kind of social contract or probationary period. The more cynical and perhaps more realistic view is that this was primarily a mechanism for the lady's family to vet a potential son-in-law. Her father, while feigning ignorance of these nocturnal visits, would almost certainly have been made aware of the situation by his wife or senior household staff. The 3-night rule served as a crucial test of the suitor's character. Was he reliable? Was he serious? Or was he flighty and impulsive? A man who could successfully and discreetly manage 3 consecutive nightly visits was demonstrating not just romantic ardor, but also discipline and respect for the house's rules. It was a way for the family to gauge his suitability before they would publicly acknowledge the union and commit their daughter and their family's reputation to him. So while you were whispering poetry in the dark, you were also, in essence, undergoing a performance review conducted by her family's board of directors. Now for a wonderfully strange piece of trivia related to this custom. What if the lady decided after the first night that she was not interested? How could she reject the suitor without causing a major diplomatic incident? She could not just send a note saying thanks but no thanks. Instead, a very subtle and strange ritual might occur. If the man showed up for the second night, he might be met by a lady in waiting who would inform him, with deep regret, that her mistress was suddenly indisposed or had to attend to a sudden ritual of purification. The most bizarre, and yet reportedly real excuse was to have a servant inform the suitor that the lady's room was being occupied by a fearsome, one-eyed demon that had unexpectedly taken up residence. No gentleman, no matter how ardent, was expected to argue with a one-eyed demon. It was the ultimate ungeable excuse, a supernatural do not disturb sign. Fortunately, you do not encounter any demons. You successfully complete your third visit. As you depart on the morning of the fourth day, you feel a profound shift. The 3 nights of secrecy are over. You have passed the trial. The relationship is no longer a fragile, clandestine affair. It has solidified. It is now a known fact within the walls of her residence. You have gone from suitor to partner in her eyes and in the eyes of her inner circle. The next step is to make that fact known to the world, and that involves a public ceremony of acknowledgement, a ritual that is, appropriately enough, centered around cake. The morning after your third successful visit dawns differently. The furtive, pre-dawn departure is still necessary, but the air is no longer thick with the anxiety of uncertainty. You have passed the trial. You have shown your commitment. The relationship, which has existed until now in a secret world of shadows, poetry, and whispers, is about to step into the light. The acknowledgement of your union will be formalized, not with a contract or a public announcement, but with a simple, symbolic, and deeply significant meal, the third day rice cakes. This ritual, known as Tokoro was high, revealing the place, or more appetizing lie, Mikano yo no maki, rice cakes of the third night, was the moment the relationship became official, at least in the eyes of the lady's family. On the third day after your first visit, the day after your third night together, the lady's family would send a formal banquet to your residence. This was their public acknowledgement of you as their daughter's partner. This was not a casual delivery. The meal would be elaborate, served in beautiful lacquered boxes and carried by a retinue of their servants. The central most important component of this feast was the maki, soft, chewy cakes made from pounded glutinous rice. These were not just a tasty snack, they were laden with symbolic meaning. Rice, as the staple of life, represented prosperity and fertility. The round, smooth shape of the maki was considered auspicious. To share this food was to formalize a bond. The arrival of these rice cakes at your home was a major event. Your own household staff would receive the delivery with great ceremony. It was a public declaration to your family and servants that you had succeeded in your courtship. You would then be expected to eat the meal with great solemnity. At this point, the lady's parents might send a formal letter along with the food, perhaps a poem of their own, welcoming you to the family. Your secret love affair had just been given the official seal of parental approval. This custom is a gold mine for social historians. It reveals the complex interplay between private romance and family politics in the Heian period. On one hand, the initial courtship was intensely personal, driven by the individual tastes and poetic skills of you and the lady. You chose each other based on artistic and emotional compatibility. But on the other hand, the relationship could not be truly cemented without the family's formal sanction. The maki ceremony was the bridge between these two worlds. It was the point where the private affair of the heart became a public alliance between the families. This has led to a debate about what this marriage really meant. Scholars question if the 3-night visit and the rice cake ceremony was considered a formal marriage. The answer is complicated. For the Heian aristocracy, this was often the de facto marriage ceremony, especially for a man taking a secondary wife or consort. There was no single, universal wedding ritual as we might think of it. The key elements were sexual union, implied by the overnight stays and public, familial acknowledgement, the rice cakes. For the woman, This was a moment of immense significance. The arrival of the cakes at your house confirmed her status. She was no longer just a woman you were secretly visiting. She was your recognized partner, and any children from the union would be considered legitimate. Now for a peculiar and rather awkward detail about this whole process. What if the family did not approve? They knew the visits were happening, but they considered you an unsuitable match. Perhaps your rank was too low, your politics were wrong, or they just did not like your poetry. In this case, the fourth day would dawn, and nothing would happen. No servants would arrive. No rice cakes would be sent. This non-event was the most devastatingly polite, and yet utterly brutal, form of rejection. It was the family's way of saying, we know what you have been doing, and we are not acknowledging it. This connection does not exist. For the lady, this would be a moment of deep humiliation, and for you, a clear sign that this path was a dead end. Fortunately, your rice cakes do arrive. You have been accepted. This also means you are now expected to visit her openly. You no longer have to sneak in through a side gate in the middle of the night. You can arrive during the day, be formally announced, and be entertained as a son-in-law. However, a strange etiquette still prevails. Even now, as her accepted partner, you would still rarely see her face clearly in the daylight. She would continue to converse with you from behind her screen of state or with her face artfully hidden by a fan. The mystery was a core part of the relationship's aesthetic, and it was maintained long after the initial courtship was over. You might have shared the most intimate moments with her in the darkness, but in the light of day, the performance of Miyabian propriety continued. You were partners, yes, but you were also performers in a never-ending play, and the stage was the elegant, beautiful, and endlessly complicated world of the court. The rice cakes have been eaten, the union acknowledged. You are, for all intents and purposes, a success story. You have navigated the treacherous waters of Heian courtship with skill and grace. But not everyone is so lucky. For every suitor who receives the ceremonial maki, there are countless others who face the cold, silent horror of rejection. And in a society where reputation is everything, a romantic failure is not just a private heartbreak, it is a public and often brutal social death. Let us imagine for a moment you are not you, the successful protagonist. Let us imagine you are your less talented, less charming cousin. He picks a lady to pursue, but his first poem is clumsy. It is a generic verse about a cherry blossom, but he sends it in July, a baffling seasonal mismatch. The paper he chooses is a garish yellow, and his calligraphy looks like a spider fell in an inkwell. The letter arrives at the lady's residence and is met not with excited whispers, but with stifled groans. Her ladies-in-waiting dissect it with merciless glee. One scoffs about a cherry blossom in this heat, saying he must think my lady is a fool. Another holds the paper at arm's length, declaring the color hurts her eyes, and that his handwriting is an insult to the brush. The lady herself, behind her screen, might simply sigh, a sound of profound disappointment. What happens next is a masterclass in passive aggression. The most common form of rejection is simply silence. Your cousin waits, and waits. The first day passes, then the second. No messenger arrives from her house. The silence is the answer. It is a soft, suffocating blanket of dismissal. There is no appeal. There is no explanation. He has been deemed unworthy, and the case is closed. But sometimes, the rejection is more active and more creative. If a suitor is particularly clueless or persistent, the lady and her entourage might decide that silence is not enough. They might feel the need to send a message. This is where the art of the rejection poem comes in, and it could be incredibly cutting. For instance, if your cousin, undeterred by the silence, sends a second, equally bad poem, the lady might decide to reply, but her poem would be a work of literary demolition. She might take his clumsy metaphor and turn it back on him with surgical precision. If he wrote about his burning love, she might reply with a poem about how the summer heat is so oppressive. It makes one feel ill and wish for a cool, cleansing rain to wash away all irritants. The subtext is clear. You are the oppressive heat. Go away. There is a wonderfully specific and quite funny piece of trivia related to this, the rotting flower rejection. If a suitor's attached flower was considered ugly, old, or inappropriate for the season, The ladies might leave it sitting out in the sun for a day or two. Then they would attach this now wilted, sad-looking blossom to their own rejection letter and send it back. It was a powerfully symbolic gesture saying, "This is what we think of your taste. It is as dead and unpleasant as this flower." This leads to a fascinating historical question. What was the psychological impact of such a system? We often think of rejection as a private pain, but here it was a semi-public spectacle. The suitor's servants knew he had been snubbed. His friends would eventually notice that his courtship had gone nowhere. And worse, the ladies in waiting on the other side would almost certainly gossip about the idiot from the Ministry of Ceremonies with the terrible handwriting. The story of his failure would become an amusing anecdote, a piece of courtly currency. Some historians argue that this public nature of courtship, while brutal, served a vital social function. It ruthlessly enforced the aesthetic standards of the court. By publicly shaming those with poor taste, the system ensured that everyone was constantly striving for a higher level of miyabi. It was a form of cultural quality control. Others argue that it created a culture of intense anxiety and conformity, where the fear of making a mistake was so great that it stifled genuine emotional expression. Was it better to write a safe, boring, technically perfect poem than to write something truly original that might be misunderstood and ridiculed? This debate gets to the heart of the tension between community standards and individual creativity that defined the Heian era. For the rejected suitor, the consequences could be severe. A particularly bad failure could tarnish his reputation for years. He would be marked as a man of no taste and uncultured boor. Other ladies would be hesitant to even consider him. In the small, insular world of the Heian elite, a major romantic blunder was like a stain that was very difficult to wash out. So, as you enjoy your newfound status as an accepted partner, spare a thought for your poor fictional cousin. He is at home, staring at his inkstone, crushed not by a single no, but by a wall of crushing silence, or, worse, a devastatingly witty poem that has been gleefully circulated among the very people he sought to impress. He has learned the hard way that in Heian, a broken heart is often the least painful consequence of a poorly written verse. Your success is a warm, glowing lantern in the refined, yet competitive, world of the Heian court. But every light casts a shadow. Now that your relationship is semi-public, acknowledged by her family and whispered about by servants, you have stepped onto a new, more dangerous stage. The game is no longer just about winning her affection. It is about navigating the treacherous currents of courtly society, a world rife with gossip, jealousy, and rivals. The first thing you notice is the change in the air when you enter a room. Your friends offer congratulations, some sincere, some tinged with a faint hint of envy. You are now the man who successfully wooed the much-admired daughter of the Minister of the Right. This elevates your status, but it also makes you a target. Gossip in the Heian court was not idle chatter. It was a form of political and social warfare. It was the information superhighway of the capital, and it was notoriously unreliable and often malicious. The details of your courtship, once secret, are now public domain, and they are being twisted and retold. A story about the clever poem you wrote might be retold with a cynical spin, suggesting he had his old poetry tutor write it for him. A tale of your discreet nightly visits might be embellished into a scandalous account of recklessness. You have to develop a thick skin to pretend you do not hear the whispers that follow you down the polished corridors. Then there's the matter of her other suitors. It is highly unlikely you were the only one trying to win her favor. While you were composing your lotus leaf poem, other men were likely sending their own verses, which were, thankfully for you, deemed inferior. These men, the ones who received the cold silence or the witty rejection poem, are now your rivals. They are not likely to challenge you to a duel with swords. The warfare of this court is far more subtle. A spurned rival might start a rumor about your financial troubles. He might compose a satirical poem, not naming you directly, but using clever metaphors that make it clear to everyone who the target is. He might try to embarrass you in a public setting, like an incense-blending competition, by challenging your taste or knowledge. You are in a cold war of aesthetics, and every public appearance is a potential battlefield. This brings us to a complex and often misunderstood aspect of Heian society, the female perspective on jealousy. While men worried about rivals, The women themselves were trapped in a system that seemed almost designed to breed jealousy and heartbreak. The very literature written by the women of the court is saturated with it. Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji is in many ways an epic study of the corrosive effects of jealousy on the lives of its female characters. A key reason for this was the accepted practice of polygyny among the male aristocracy. A man was expected to have one principal wife, the Kiten no Kata, who was usually from a family of equal or higher rank, but he was also free to take on any number of secondary wives, consorts, and less formal lovers. Your new partner, the daughter of the Minister of the Right, is likely destined to be your principal wife due to her high standing, but you will be expected, over time, to acquire other partners. This system created an environment of constant, simmering competition among a man's various women. They were not just competing for his affection, but for security, status, and most importantly, for the future of their children. The son of a principal wife had the strongest claim to inheritance and titles. The son of a lower-ranking consort faced a much more uncertain future. A woman's position was never truly secure. A new, younger, more beautiful, or more poetically gifted rival could appear at any time, capturing the man's attention and resources. This has led to a poignant historical debate. How did Heian women cope with this reality? Were they passive victims of a cruel system? The literary evidence suggests a far more complex picture. Women's diaries and tales show them developing sophisticated strategies for survival and resistance. They used their artistic talents to maintain their husband's interest. They forged powerful alliances with their own families and with other women in the court. They channeled their frustrations and sorrows into creating some of the most enduring masterpieces of Japanese literature. Their jealousy, while a source of immense personal pain, also became a powerful creative fuel. It was not just a destructive emotion, but a catalyst for art, and there was also a belief in a very strange, very real form of supernatural jealousy. This was the concept of the Mononoke, a spirit of a living or dead person, often a jealous lover or a neglected wife, that could possess another person and cause them to fall ill, even die. If a man's wife suddenly fell sick, it was not uncommon for the family to suspect that she was being possessed by the angry spirit of one of his other lovers. Exorcisms and Buddhist rituals would be performed to try and drive the malevolent spirit away. This belief, while seeming strange to us, was a powerful expression of the very real psychological torment that the system of polygyny inflicted on women. For now, your love is new and seems unassailable, but as you look to the future, you must understand that the world you have entered is not a simple romance. It is a complex web of social obligations, rivalries, and deeply ingrained cultural practices that will challenge you both. Your success has brought you happiness, but it has also brought you a lifetime of new, more complicated problems. Your relationship with the minister's daughter is now the central pillar of your social life. She will be your principal wife, the Kita no Kata, the mistress of your household and the mother of your primary heir. This is a political and social alliance as much as it is a romantic one. Your two families are now linked, their fortunes intertwined. But in the world of the Heian aristocracy, a man's emotional and romantic life was rarely, if ever, confined to a single stream. You are now a man of standing, and it is not only accepted but expected that you will cultivate other relationships. Your world is about to become much more complicated. This is the reality of the polygynous society you inhabit. While the principal wife held the highest rank and managed the household, a man was free to establish relationships with other women of varying status. These might be other daughters of respectable courtiers who would become official secondary wives, or they might be ladies-in-waiting, dancers, or women from less prominent families who would be considered consorts or lovers. Your life becomes a delicate balancing act, a constant negotiation of emotions, obligations, and politics. Let us say you become captivated by the poetry of a lower-ranking lady-in-waiting at court. Her wit is sharp, her calligraphy exquisite. You begin a new courtship with her, a new exchange of secret poems. This affair would be conducted with the same level of artistic refinement as your first, but the stakes would be different. This woman will not be your principal wife. Her family does not have the standing, but your connection with her could be just as emotionally intense. if not more so. She might represent a kind of freedom, an escape from the heavy political obligations of your primary marriage. Your challenge is how to manage this without causing a crisis at home. You must be the ultimate diplomat. You must continue to show your principal wife the utmost respect and attention. You would never conduct your new courtship in a way that would publicly humiliate her. Her position as the lady of the house must remain unassailable. But she will know, in the small, gossipy world of the court, secrets are impossible to keep. Her attendants will hear rumors from their friends at court. She will notice your late-night absences, the distraction in your eyes, the scent of a different woman's incense faintly clinging to your robes. This is where the emotional architecture of the Heian marriage reveals its inherent instability. The principal wife was expected to tolerate her husband's other relationships with a kind of stoic, dignified grace. To throw a public fit of jealousy would be considered unseemly and a sign of poor breeding. But beneath that placid surface, immense turmoil was the norm. Her diaries, if she kept them, would be filled with poems of sorrow, loneliness, and quiet resentment. A strange but fascinating aspect of this system was the spatial arrangement of a man's different women. Often, a man would establish his various wives or consorts in different parts of the capital, or even in different wings of his own large residential compound. He would then visit them on a kind of rotation. This practice, while seeming cold and methodical to us, was a way of managing the complex web of relationships. A woman's status could often be judged by the frequency and duration of his visits. This leads to a deep and ongoing debate among historians of gender and family in Japan. Was this system a brutal manifestation of male power, designed to control and compartmentalize women, or did it, in a strange way, give women a degree of autonomy? A wife who lived in her own residence, supported by her husband but not in constant contact with him, had a certain amount of freedom. She managed her own household, cultivated her own artistic pursuits, and was the queen of her own small domain. Some scholars argue that this visiting husband system, known as Ko-Icon, gave aristocratic women a sphere of influence and independence that was lost in later years when wives moved permanently into their husband's family home. The truth is likely a complex mixture of both oppression and opportunity. As a man navigating this world, your life is a logistical and emotional puzzle. You might spend nights with your principal wife, discussing your son's education and the politics of the court. The next night, you might visit your second consort across town, a talented musician with whom you share a passion for the flute. You have to remember which poetic conversations you are having with whom. To accidentally send a poem meant for one lover to another would be a mistake of catastrophic proportions. Your success in this world depends not on your strength or your wealth, but on your emotional intelligence and your sensitivity. You must be a master of nuance, able to read the subtle signs of unhappiness in your principal wife and the quiet hopes of your newest consort. Your every action is a political statement that reverberates through your network of alliances. To neglect one woman is to insult her entire family. To favor another too openly is to risk alienating the rest. It is a life of immense privilege, but it is also a life lived under the constant, crushing pressure of maintaining a delicate and ultimately unsustainable balance. We have spent a lot of time focused on you, the male suitor navigating this labyrinth of poetry and propriety. We have seen you sweat over your calligraphy and celebrate the arrival of rice cakes. But to truly understand this world, we have to slip behind the screen of state, the kicho, and try to see this entire game from the other side. We must consider what this experience was like for the women who were its objects, its judges, and in many ways its most brilliant players. From the moment she is born, the life of a high-ranking noblewoman is a performance in waiting. She is raised not to be a warrior or a scholar in the male sense, but to be a living work of art. Her education is intense, but it is focused entirely on the aesthetic arts. She must master several different musical instruments like the multi-stringed koto. She must be able to compose waka poetry with speed and cleverness. She must, like you, have impeccable calligraphy, and she must be an expert in the blending of incense, the layering of colors, and the subtle language of flowers. Her entire value in the eyes of society in the marriage market is tied to her artistic accomplishments. When your first poem arrives, it is not a surprise. It is the moment she and her attendants have been preparing for. The letter is brought to her, and the analysis begins. While you are sweating with anxiety on your side of town, she and her ladies are coolly deconstructing your every choice. They are the admissions committee, and your letter is the application. They would judge your handwriting first, as we have discussed. Then they would analyze your poem. They assess its originality, its sensitivity, and its correct use of classical allusion. A clumsy poem would be met with scorn and ridicule. A brilliant one would be a source of genuine excitement. One of the ladies might say that at last, a man of taste has arrived. Here, we see the first flicker of female power in this seemingly patriarchal system. The woman, though hidden and physically constrained, holds the power of judgment. She and her attendants are the gatekeepers. They have the ability to say no. By refusing to answer, or by sending a cutting rejection poem, a lady could exercise a significant degree of choice over her own romantic life. She could hold out for a partner, who she felt was her intellectual and artistic equal. This is where the writings of the Heian women themselves become our most valuable guide. We are incredibly fortunate to have works like The Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu and The Pillow Book by S.E. Ishona Gon. These are not dry historical accounts. They are vivid, personal, and often witty windows into the inner lives of these cloistered women, and they reveal a world that is far from passive. S.E. Ishona Gon's Pillow Book, for example, is a collection of lists, observations, and anecdotes. She has lists like things that make one's heart beat faster, which includes things like seeing the sparrow feeding its young, and, of course, receiving a letter from a lover written on beautiful Michin OKU paper. She also has lists of hateful things, which includes a lover who is clumsy when he leaves in the morning. These books show us women who are keen observers, sharp critics, and active participants in the culture of their time. This leads to one of the most important ongoing debates among scholars of this period. To what degree were women like Murasaki Shikibu, who served as a lady-in-waiting to an empress, able to wield real political influence? The answer seems to be indirectly, but significantly. An empress or high-ranking consort who was known for her intelligence and taste would attract a salon of equally talented ladies-in-waiting. This salon would become a center of cultural and artistic production. A powerful man might seek to have his daughter serve in such a salon, to elevate his own family's prestige. The empress, in turn, could use her influence and the prestige of her circle to champion certain political causes or to subtly support the careers of her favored male relatives. Her power was not formal, but it was real. It flowed not from a sword or a title, but from a brushing ducato. So, when your lady love receives your poems, she is not just a blushing maiden waiting to be impressed. She is the CEO of her own personal brand. Her ladies-in-waiting are her board of directors. Her response to you is a carefully considered strategic move, designed to enhance her own reputation as a woman of taste and discernment. By being a challenging, discerning partner in the poetic exchange, she elevates her own status. To be won over too easily would be a sign of poor taste on her part. Her power is subtle, indirect, and artistic, but it is a power nonetheless. She cannot command an army, but she can destroy a man's reputation with a single, perfectly crafted 31-syllable poem. And in the world of Heian Kyo, that was a weapon to be feared and respected. Your life, and your love life in particular, is not lived in a vacuum. It is deeply embedded in the rhythms of the natural world. In the Heian court, the seasons were not just a backdrop for human drama. They were an active participant in it. Every poem you write, every robe you wear, every flower you choose is dictated by the subtle, yet absolute, authority of the calendar. To be out of sync with the season was to be out of sync with the universe. Your courtship began in early summer, with a poem about a dead rip on a lotus leaf. Your conversation then shifted to autumn with her challenge about the turning of the maple leaves and your response about the lonely chill of the longer nights. Now, as your relationship deepens, you find that every stage of your life together is interwoven with the changing scenery outside your paper screens. In the spring, the entire court is consumed by a single, overwhelming obsession, the cherry blossoms. This is not just a mild appreciation for pretty flowers. It is a national aesthetic crisis. For the week or two that the sakura are in bloom, Normal life screeches to a halt. The government might as well shut down. Everyone's attention is focused on viewing parties, poetry contests, and elaborate picnics under the blossoming trees. The beauty of the flowers is breathtaking, but the experience is defined by the poignant knowledge, the mono no aware, that this beauty is incredibly fleeting. A single gust of wind or a heavy rain can bring it all to an end. You and your wife would, of course, participate. You might host your own blossom viewing party in your garden, inviting friends to compose poems on the theme of transience. The color of your robes, the food you serve, the music you play, it all must be perfectly calibrated to the delicate, ephemeral mood of the sakura. Your love in this season feels as beautiful and as fragile as the blossoms themselves. As the vibrant green of summer arrives, the mood shifts. The heat and humidity descend on the capital, making the heavy silk robes feel oppressive. This is a time for seeking coolness and relief. You might spend your days near the water, perhaps on a boat on one of the rivers that flow through the city, trying to catch a breeze. The romance of this season is one of languid, quiet intimacy. The quintessential summer sound is the cry of the hatotogisu, the lesser cuckoo, a bird whose call was considered hauntingly beautiful and was the subject of countless poems. You might send a poem to one of your other consorts, comparing your longing for her to the cuckoo's plaintive cry in the night. Then comes autumn, the season that many Heian writers considered the most profound and emotionally resonant. The oppressive heat breaks, the air turns crisp, and the world is painted in the spectacular colors of the turning maple leaves and the gold of the rice fields. This is the season for moon viewing parties. On the night of the full moon, you and your companions would gather on a veranda or in a boat, sip rice wine, and compose poems dedicated to the moon's lonely, perfect beauty. It is a season of melancholy and deep feeling. The love you express in autumn is mature, thoughtful, and tinged with a beautiful sadness. This obsession with the moon brings up a wonderfully strange piece of courtly life, the moon-waiting gathering. Sometimes a group would assemble before the moon had risen, and the entire point of the evening was to wait for it together, building the anticipation. The conversation and poetry would all be about the act of waiting, the longing for the moon to appear. This is a perfect metaphor for Heian romance itself. The waiting is often more important than the arrival. Finally, winter descends. The gardens are bare, the trees are stark silhouettes against a gray sky, and sometimes a blanket of pure white snow covers the capital. The world shrinks. Life moves indoors, closer to the warmth of the charcoal braziers. This is a season for introspection, for reading old stories, and for a quiet, domestic intimacy. The beauty of this season is found in its starkness. A single red camellia blossom against the white snow becomes an image of incredible power and resilience. You might spend a snowy evening with your principal wife, not talking, but simply listening to the sound of the snow piling up on the roof. A shared, silent appreciation of the quiet of the world. This deep integration of life and season is a subject of endless fascination for historians. They wonder if it was a form of nature worship, a kind of pre-modern environmentalism, or if it was, once again, another form of sophisticated aesthetic gatekeeping. To truly master the seasonal codes, to know which of the dozens of main shades of red was appropriate for the 9th month, or which specific bird's cry was associated with which week of summer, required a lifetime of study and immersion. It was a language that only the elite could speak fluently. The provincial warrior, no matter how powerful, would inevitably betray his ignorance by wearing the wrong color or praising the wrong flower, marking himself as an outsider. The seasons in this sense were a beautiful, unreachable wall that protected the exclusivity of the court. For you, however, it is simply the rhythm of your life. Your love is not a single, unchanging emotion. It is a living thing, a garden that you must tend, and its colors, its scents, and its very character change with the turning of the earth. Your carefully balanced world of poetry, seasonal rituals, and multiple romantic attachments feels, on the surface, like a perfectly controlled work of art. But beneath the layers of silkened propriety, powerful and dangerous emotions are churning. And in the Heian worldview, a sufficiently powerful emotion, especially the corrosive force of jealousy, could take on a life of its own. You might be a master of poetic flirtation, but you are still a novice when it comes to dealing with the mononoke. The concept of the mononoke is one of the most chilling and psychologically fascinating aspects of this period. It refers to an evil spirit, but not in the way we might think of a ghost or a demon. A mononoke was typically the spirit of a living person, projected out from their body by the sheer force of their unbridled passion, or, more commonly, their rage and jealousy. It was, in essence, a psychic attack, and the primary victims of these attacks were the rivals or neglectful husbands of the woman projecting the spirit. Let us say you have been spending a bit too much time with your charming new consort, the one who plays the flute so beautifully. You have been captivated by her, and without meaning to, you have neglected your visits to another, older lover, a lady of fierce pride and deep feelings. You have not seen her in weeks. Her letters have gone unanswered. In her seclusion, her loneliness festers. Her sorrow turns to resentment, her resentment to a cold, hard rage. And one night, without her even being aware of it, the force of that rage detaches from her sleeping body and travels across the city to your new favorite's residence. The attack is not dramatic. It begins subtly. Your new consort, the flute player, starts to feel unwell. She has headaches, nightmares. She grows listless and pale. Her ladies-in-waiting are concerned. They brew medicinal teas, but nothing helps. Her condition worsens. She becomes weak, feverish, and starts speaking in delirious whispers. This is when the suspicion begins. This is not a normal illness. This feels like something unnatural. The ladies of the household will whisper amongst themselves. They note it started right after the master began visiting so frequently, and that Lady Rokujo has been terribly unhappy lately. An invisible arrow of suspicion is fired across town, aimed at the heart of the neglected lover. To confirm their fears, the family would summon a Buddhist priest or an onmyoji diviner to perform a diagnosis. This is where things get truly strange. The priest would conduct a ritual, chanting sutras and prayers over the sick woman, trying to draw the malevolent spirit out. The goal was to coax the mononoke to possess a medium, usually a young girl or acolyte, who would then speak with the spirit's voice. Imagine the scene. You are kneeling in the sick room, which is thick with the smoke of ritual incense. Your beloved lies pale and sweating on her pallet. The priest is chanting loudly. The young medium, sitting nearby, suddenly goes into a trance. Her body stiffens, and when she speaks, it is not with her own voice, but with the chilling, familiar voice of your other lover, Lady Rokujo. The voice coming from the medium's lips is full of venom and sorrow. It might hiss that you thought you could cast it aside, that you thought it would just fade away while you entertain yourself with this flute player. It vows that you will not be allowed to have the happiness that was stolen, and that you will suffer as the spirit has suffered. This scene, which is famously unterrifyingly depicted in the tale of Genji, with the possession of several of Genji's lovers by the spirit of the proud Lady Rokujo, is the subject of intense historical debate. What was actually happening here? From a modern psychological perspective, it is a classic case of mass psychosomatic suggestion. The sick woman is ill, the family is anxious, and the medium is a young, impressionable person who is highly sensitive to the undercurrents of gossip and suspicion in the household. The medium is not faking it. She is unconsciously channeling the collective anxieties of the room, giving a voice and a name to the unspoken fears of everyone present. But for you, a man of the 11th century, this is not psychology. This is a supernatural emergency. The spirit has confessed. Now, the priest must perform an exorcism. This would involve louder chanting, more elaborate rituals, and sometimes even aggressive, symbolic gestures meant to frighten the spirit away. If the exorcism was successful, the medium would collapse exhausted, and the sick woman would, hopefully, begin to recover. But the damage is done. The affair has been poisoned by this supernatural drama. Even if your consort recovers, a cloud of fear and resentment will hang over your relationship, and you are now faced with a terrible dilemma. You must go to the woman whose spirit is believed to have caused the possession, the neglected Lady Rokujo. You must appease her, show her renewed attention, and try to soothe the wounded pride that launched the psychic attack in the first place. You are forced back into the arms of one lover by the illness of another. This belief system, while seemingly bizarre, served as a powerful, if terrifying, form of female agency. In a society where a woman had no formal power to protest her husband's infidelity or neglect, the mononoke was her weapon. It was a way for her repressed rage to manifest and have a very real, very disruptive effect on her husband's life. It was the ultimate passive-aggressive superpower, born from the unique pressures and sorrows of the world you all inhabit. The years pass. The intense, heart-pounding drama of the initial courtship, the thrill of the first secret visits, the triumph of the third-day rice cakes, they all soften, receding into the tapestry of memory. Your life has settled into a rhythm, a predictable cycle of seasons, ceremonies, and domestic responsibilities. The sharp edges of passion have been worn smooth by the steady, quiet stream of daily life. And just as your relationships began with the subtle language of poetry, they often fade with an equally quiet, unspoken vocabulary of decline. A relationship in the Heian court rarely ends with a dramatic confrontation or a formal separation. That would be messy, unrefined, a violation of Miyobi. Instead, it atrophies. It withers on the vine, starved of the attention and artistry that once made it bloom. The process of falling out of love is as mannered and as aesthetically coded as the process of falling in love. It begins with the poems. Perhaps you are the one whose interest has waned. You are distracted by a new political appointment, or by a new, more exciting romantic prospect. Your letters to one of your older consorts become less frequent. When you do write, the poems are perfunctory. You write about the weather, safe, impersonal topic reminiscent of your very first letters. But now it lacks the subtext, the spark of longing. The artistry is gone. You are just going through the motions. Your calligraphy might become a little sloppier, a little more rushed. You forget to attach a flower. She, on her end, reads these signs with an expert and sinking heart. She knows what the decline in quality and frequency means. Her replies might at first be attempts to rekindle the flame. She might send you a poem of breathtaking sadness and beauty, reminding you of a shared memory, a quiet challenge to your fading affections. It is a last, desperate attempt to engage your artistic soul. But if your heart has truly moved on, your perfunctory replies will continue, and eventually, so will hers. The correspondence, which was once a rapid-fire volley of wit and passion, slows to a crawl. A week goes by between letters. Then, too, the silence begins to stretch, becoming a chasm between you. And one day you both simply stop right. There is no final goodbye. The conversation just ends. Another clear sign of a relationship's decay is the change in your visits. You used to visit her 3 times a week. Now, it is once a month. Then, you only appear on ceremonial occasions. You might plead the pressures of your work at court, the need to attend to a distant provincial matter. These are polite fictions that you both understand. The truth is simply that you do not desire to be there. Your absence is the message. This slow managed decline is a central theme in Heian literature. The tale of Genji is filled with the stories of women who were once the center of Prince Genji's universe, only to find themselves living in quiet, lonely retirement in a forgotten wing of a palace, visited once a year out of a sense of duty. Their plight is treated with immense sympathy. Their sorrow is real, but their dignity lies in their quiet, graceful acceptance of their fate. To make a scene, to rage against the dying of the light, would be to lose the one thing they had left, their refined composure. This brings up a painful historical question. What happened to these women? A principal wife, the Kita no Kata, was usually secure. Her position was protected by her powerful family. But for a secondary wife or a consort from a less influential background, being abandoned by her patron was a disaster. If he stopped supporting her financially, she could fall into genuine poverty. Her ladies-in-waiting would have to be dismissed. Her fine robes would grow worn. Her residence would fall into disrepair. Her only hope was often that her son might achieve some success at court and be able to support her in her old age. Sometimes the only option left for a forgotten woman was to leave the world, to become a Buddhist nun. This was not always a decision born of pure religious piety. It was often a pragmatic choice, a way to find a respectable and secure retirement from the brutal romantic battlefield of the court. It was a final, graceful exit. And so, you see it happening, The vibrant, witty woman you once exchanged passionate autumn poems with is now a name you rarely speak. The residence you once snuck into in the dead of night is a place you now pass by without a second glance. The love did not die in a fire. It simply grew cold from neglect. The end came not with a bang, but with the silent, empty space where a poem used to be. It is a profoundly saddened, exquisitely civilized form of heartbreak, a final, melancholy testament to the transient, impermanent nature of all beautiful things. You stand on the polished wood of your veranda, looking out over a garden you have known your entire life. It is autumn again. A single, perfect crimson maple leaf detaches from its branch and spirals slowly, silently, to the mossy ground below. You are no longer the young, ambitious man who fretted over the composition of his first poem. You are a senior courtier, a husband, a father, a man whose life has been a long, intricate tapestry woven from silk, paper, and unspoken rules. You look back on it all, the breathless anticipation, the terror of that first clandestine visit, the complex dance of jealousy and obligation, and you find yourself asking the question that has haunted this entire culture. A question that historians still grapple with today. Was any of it truly love, or was it all just art? Was the woman you pursued with such passion a person or a prize? Was your desire for her or for the validation that came with winning a partner of such exquisite taste? When you wept at your sorrowful parting on that first dawn, were you weeping for the loss of her presence, or were you admiring your own capacity for beautiful poetic sadness? This is the central, unresolvable tension of the Heian court. It was a society that elevated romance to the highest form of artistic expression, but in doing so, it risked turning love into just another aesthetic competition, like incense blending or a picture judging contest. The performance of love, the perfect poem, the elegant gesture, the graceful melancholy, was often more important than the raw, messy, and unscriptable emotion itself. The map, it seems, had become more important than the territory. Consider your relationship with your principal wife. It is a bond of deep respect, shared history, and familial duty. You have raised children together. You manage a great household. It is a partnership, successful and enduring. But is it passionate? The fires of the initial courtship have long since cooled into comfortable embers. The relationship works because it adheres to the social and aesthetic forms that your world demands. Then you think of the other women. The brilliant musician whose art touched your soul but whose family lacked the rank for a formal union. The quiet, gentle lady in the western wing who you neglected, and whose resentful spirit may have caused such turmoil. Were those relationships more real because they existed outside the formal structures of marriage, or were they simply another kind of performance, a different role to play in the grand theater of your life? There is a powerful argument, made by many scholars, that we are asking the wrong question. To try and separate real love from artistic performance is to impose a modern, Western dichotomy on a culture that would not have recognized it. For you, a man of the Heian court, there was no difference. Expressing your love through art was the only way to make it real. The poem was not a container for the feeling. The act of composing and sending the perfect poem was the feeling. The artifice did not hide the emotion, it was the emotion. The performance was the reality. Your life has been a testament to this ideal. You have loved, you have lost, you have grieved, and you have celebrated. And you have done it all through the prescribed rituals of your culture. You have measured out your life in 31-syllable verses. You see another leaf fall. You are reminded of the very first poem she ever sent you. The one that took your simple summer daydream and turned it into a profound promise of autumn's true colors. She was right. The fleeting infatuation of that summer moment was just water. The true colors of your life together were revealed not in a single flash of passion, but over the long, slow turning of the seasons. It was a palette of duty, affection, frustration, and quiet companionship. It was not the simple, passionate red of a lover's heart, but the complex, layered, and ultimately more enduring brocade of a shared life. It was love as you understand it. It was the only way you ever knew how to love. Now the world around you begins to soften. The sharp edges of the garden, the precise lines of the roof, they all seem to dissolve into the gentle twilight. The story is over. The ink on the scroll is dry. Let the sounds of that ancient capital fade away, replaced by the soft hum of the fan in your own room. The rustle of silk becomes the rustle of your own sheets. The scent of incense becomes the simple, clean smell of the night air. You can feel the weight of your own eyelids now, as heavy and as gentle as the first winter snow falling on the silent streets of Heian Japan. The intricate rules of poetry and the anxieties of courtship no longer concern you. You are floating now, drifting on a quiet stream, away from the world of screens and shadows. Let the current carry you. There are no more words to write, no more replies to wait for. There is only the deep, dreamless quiet that comes after a long story has been told. You are safe now in the stillness of your own bed, in the soft darkness of your own night. Just breathe and let go.